The smell walk slows people down, and it becomes almost like a meditative practice because we are focusing on it, and because it is for maybe 45 minutes of thinking about smells. It does enable you just to sort of like to slow and to think in slightly different ways, rather than being obsessed with getting somewhere on time. Actually, you can become slightly more obsessed with getting somewhere in a really lovely way, or a way that is good for how you feel at that moment in time, whether you want to be stimulated or whether you want to walk through and be somewhere in a calmer environment. I think smell is definitely about, it's the slow food movement of existence.
Hello and welcome to 21st Century Vitalism. This is a podcast exploring how we can best maintain a sense of energy, inspiration, and wakefulness while navigating the complexities of the modern world. My name is Brett Kane, and I'll be your host on this journey as we have a multidisciplinary conversation with a wide variety of speakers from around the globe. This typically includes spiritual teachers, somatic practitioners, artists, activists, and ecologists. Though the floor is open to anyone who I feel is bearing this torch well. And if I were to ever emphasize one thing with this show, it's that there's always more of life to open up to. For many of us, our day-to-day experience can become quite predictable as we settle into our habits and routines. This predictability has its perks, no doubt, but it can also stifle our ability to muster up some healthy wonder and curiosity. That's why I'm always so keen to explore topics that remind us that there's an incredible amount of magic to be found in the very simple perceptions of our everyday life. Today's topic is doing just that, as we're putting a magnifying glass up to something so near to us that we could be totally missing it. That is our sense of smell. It's honestly such a nuanced and profound exploration that I knew I needed some help to properly lay the case out for why it deserves more of your attention. Lucky for us, I found just the right person in Dr. Kate Mclean. She's a UK-based cartographer of city smellscapes, where she takes willing participants on walks through different urban environments and encourages them to smell, well, everything. She then takes the data collected from these smell walks and turns them into visual maps that chart out each city's unique smell signatures. And these maps can help us understand how smells anchor us to a sense of place, as well as provide some useful insights into design, art making, and historical understanding. Having done this process in over 40 cities from all around the globe, Kate is compiling her work into an upcoming book called The Atlas of Smells, which you can stay plugged into by checking out her site over at sensorymaps.com. She also has her thesis paper on this exact subject if you'd like to dive deep into the thick of things and really understand her entire system. For this conversation, we explore not only her mapping project, but smell as a whole. How does it work? What's the benefit of improving our sense of smell? And what would be lost if we couldn't smell? There's some really fun explorations in this episode that I am sure will be reality shifting for those who commit to the hang. I will say that there was a brief network issue some 10 minutes into the conversation, so if you're watching this on YouTube and notice a scene change, that is why. It doesn't really interrupt the flow of the conversation though, so don't worry about that. So that's what we have going on for today's episode. As always, before we get started, if you want to support the show, consider signing up for the Patreon at patreon.com/21st Century Vitalism. Any little bit helps me keep the lights on and lets me know that you're out there and connecting with what we're talking about on this show. If finances are tight, I totally understand. You're also welcome to subscribe on YouTube, liking the video and sharing it if that suits your fancy. Or alternatively, you can just follow us on Instagram to stay up to date on all the upcoming episodes. So without further ado, please sit back, drink some tea, maybe do some stretches, but most importantly, open your heart for Dr. Kate Mclean. Okay, Kate, hello. Welcome to the show. We are now recording. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much for giving me some of your time, joining me from across the globe. It's always great when I can connect with people from the UK. So it's an honor to have you on. And I just want to start by asking, how's it going today?
Thank you very much in the first place for the invitation to be here. I love this connectivity and the stuff that we can do. It's great. How's today going? Today is pretty lovely here in the UK. It is incredibly warm. The leaves have all turned yellow and orange, and the sun was out today, and it's just one of those. It's been one of those magical days.
Interesting. I don't know what the UK's like fall is like or like when that starts or ends, but we just got past the turning of the leaves ourselves and it's starting to get into the more gray season. I'm in Michigan in the United States.
Okay.
So yeah, the fall is one of my favorite seasons and I just love just as we're going to be talking about all the smells in the air and like things kind of decomposing and breaking down. It creates this like really rich kind of scentscape that I think is just so nostalgic in a lot of ways.
And that's part of the magic why I love being out and walking in this type of environment this time of year. You have the leaves on the ground, you have the mushrooms growing if you get your nose up close to them. It's and at the moment, while it's still the warmth in the sun, there's still something coming through from that, and there's the fields have been newly sort of just planted with small things. So you've just got this great combination, and it's warmer than normal. So the scentscape's just a little bit richer, a little bit fresher.
Yeah.
Do you want me to move location? Are we looking at having issues here?
You're sounding pretty good right now. I mean, the
Okay.
video feed is a little fuzzy, but I'm hearing you
Yeah.
all right. So that's
Okay.
the important one. It's a audio medium most of the time. Uh, so as we're kind of getting onto the precipice of what we're going to talk about today, I do want to open this conversation up by giving you a chance to share a little bit about the work that you do. I'll likely have explained some of it in the intro, but it is just so unique and novel that I think it might be better to hear it coming from you rather than me trying to summarize it.
It's one of those wonderful. I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I was looking to do something a little bit different. And I was very concerned about how graphic design was moving very much towards the digital, but the digital was trying to emulate the real world. And I thought if the digital is trying to emulate the real world, it might be a good idea to look and say, what is it about the real world that's so good that the digital is trying to emulate? And it was doing some really good sort of skeuomorphic design back in the sort of like the 2009 2010, and that tactile element, I just sort of thought, well, what happens if you actually go out and touch places? And I was undertaking an MFA in Edinburgh in Scotland, and I just thought I want to go out and sense the world in a different way, and I want to draw attention to what the senses actually sort of like convey. And I created some maps and of Edinburgh and how people were describing the textures of Edinburgh, so you could touch the maps. They didn't have any colour in them. It was just purely about being tactile. And then I swapped senses, and I suddenly got incredibly fascinated with smell. And I looked it up, and I couldn't really find many people that were doing anything with scent and cartography at the time. And wanting to actually ground it much more and saying it was sort of like really accessible and open to anybody, instead of calling it sort of olfactory cartography, I decided that smell mapping actually just said what it did.
Hmm.
And to be quite honest, I've never looked back. I mean, I've got an attention span of a gnat, and this has kept me going for the last 15 years. And it's still fascinating. Every single new place I get the opportunity to go out, I lead smell walks. The smell walks result in data. I take that data, I interpret it, I analyze it, and then I create maps of smellscapes, where most maps will show you what the roads and the towns and the buildings look like. My maps enable you to imagine what the smellscape would look like if we could see it. And I
Wow.
think
That's
I think
amazing.
that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, that's so wonderful. So what was it about smell that uniquely kind of captured your attention? I mean, there's so many ways to map things and to be able to sense into the world, and I think a lot of people kind of don't really give smell the credit that it deserves. So what was it about it that really captured you?
I, I'm somebody who very much likes a challenge, and the more that
Hmm.
I considered what the variables involved in smell were, I mean, realised just how complex it was, and the fact that it we all smell in different ways. We have 400 olfactory receptors. Our genetic makeup's different. We don't all have the same ones turned on. So no two people will really smell the same thing as each other. We don't have very much of a
Wow.
language for it. We we will start we will smell things as kids, and then we don't have any real education that values smell. And then you've got the beautiful variables of the smell might be not be there if you came back the next day. The wind might take it in a different direction. If you're a different height from the ground and your nose is a different height from the ground, you'll smell a different combination of smells. And a smell is never just one thing, it's always a complex combination of something that's context and background with what you're smelling on top of that. And I just loved the fact that it involved chemistry, biology, physiology, meteorology, physics, and then cartography. And I just thought, nobody's communicating it visually. I'd like to have a go and see how I
Yeah.
can do it. It's the complexity of it that I
Yeah.
think I find fascinating.
Wow, yeah. So as you're, mapping smells, how relevant is that kind of visual representation, say like a week from there? Like what is it that makes these smell maps kind of have a sense of longevity about them that can be useful over time?
Uh, it's a really, really good question because they're very much designed, and this is they're designed to get people to challenge a map and to not believe it. So the idea of a
Mm,
map in terms of smell mapping is that you really should go out and experience it for yourself. So the map is there to say, I'm not sure I believe that. I need to go and find out for
yeah.
myself. And maybe it's that, and that any of the smell maps are a moment in time. They're like Impressionist paintings. So Impressionist
Yeah.
paintings capture light at a moment and had an enduring quality. And I'm not comparing what the quality of what I do with the Impressionist painters, but the philosophy and the the whole background to it are very similar. You can't capture a smellscape, and especially mine are recorded by any number of people. It's always or almost always a local population that records it. I just take that data and interpret it. So it's subjective, it's time dependent, it's a map of a moment in time, but it's also a map that says, please come here and experience this for yourself and see if you agree or not.
Wow, I love that. So is that kind of the biggest takeaway that you would like people to have when they are kind of looking at your work is to inspire them to engage with this sense of smell in a more deep way? Or is there something else that you hope people kind of leave feeling inspired to do?
I think it's not necessarily about engaging with smell in a deeper way. It's just engaging with smell, even if that's just for a short period of time. It's to recognise just what you can learn from the world around you if you use smell as your primary sense of knowing, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes. And it's quite sweet. I've just been visiting my granddaughter, and it's great getting her to smell things because she's responsive to that. And you give her rosemary to smell and she smells it, and you give her sort of like marshmallow to smell and she smells it. And I sort of, the poor kids are going to just sort of like have this all the way through her life now. I'm just going to be giving her things to smell and asking her about them. But
Yeah,
she
yeah,
she
yeah.
might get a smell education where sort of like it's starting to become a lot more. paid heed to in different places around the world, and there's some fabulous people doing some great work in Australia, in the US, and in Europe about smell education. And we've moved on so much in the sort of like the last 15 years since I started. But what I'd like people to do is just to say, what does smell contribute to my understanding of this place that I'm in? What does it bring in addition to the other senses that just makes me feel a certain way about where I am at this moment in time?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'd love this podcast to kind of help bring people into that world. And I think something that might be useful to kind of set the table for people to engage with this sense, which is always with us, but oftentimes kind of a secondary or even like a tertiary thing. I guess what might be useful is, could you talk a little bit about the physiology of what happens when we smell? Like, what exactly is happening? Because the more that I learn about it, the more I'm like, oh my God, it's so weird.
It's almost like it's a set of things that you wish you didn't know, but you can't unknow once you
Yeah.
do know. Somebody
Yeah.
asked me the other day and
That's
said,
that's the subtext of my podcast.
is it really true that actually when you are smelling, you're actually ingesting those chemicals? And the answer is yes. So
Oh
smell,
gosh, yeah, that's there.
yeah, it's there. Yeah, all those wonderful things that you kind of prefer not to actually know about. The sense of smell is phenomenal. It's a chemical sense, and the smells detected in human everyday life are sort of like this cocktail of molecules. So, if I give an example, a strawberry contains over 360 volatile compounds, and those combine to sort of like create the smell of a strawberry. Coffee, even more impressively, has about 1,000 different volatile molecules. So you think of each of those as a sort of like as a chemical, and so you've got 1,000 of them that are active, and to human perception, about 20 to 40 contribute to its aroma. So those smells, they enter our body via our noses and our mouths. So when you're inhaling a breath, you're basically inhaling some of those volatile molecules. And what they do is they go up into your nasal cavity, and they're detected by little olfactory sensory neurons that are there's one each side at the top of your sort of like palate. They're about 5 centimeters squared each, and they're called the olfactory epithelium. And on that olfactory epithelium, each one of us possesses about sort of 6 to 10 million neurons per nostril. So we've got about 12 to 20 million different little neurons that are detecting the volatile compounds that come in. And they're replaced in humans sort of like every 30 to 40 days. And so the molecules then adhere to the neurons, and it's thought that it's sort of like this lock and key mechanism, so different shapes detect different things, and those signals then get sent to the brain and processed. So yes, basically what happens when you are smelling is that you are inhaling small particles of the world around you, and they are going into your nasal cavity, and then they're being detected and they're being sensed.
Wow. So
It's
is the
complex.
experience? Yeah, yeah, it is. So is the experience of a smell? Is it more of an interpretation, or is there kind of a direct communion with the chemicals themselves, or is your brain doing kind of something to convey some sense of something legible in a way?
There's a lot of research at the moment in terms of neuroscience, in terms of how when we sense something, we are bringing to it our prior knowledge of whether we've actually encountered that before. And from an evolutionary perspective as well, it's quite useful to us as humans to be able to say, oh, that smell I don't need to worry about, that one I do. So We are processing it, but it's one of the reasons why we don't smell something with every breath that we take, because if we did, then we're breathing 22,000 times a day. We'd have 22,000 different smells a day that we were detecting. And
Yeah.
that would just take, it would take all of our sort of like brain overload at that moment in time. So we have these sort of, these beautiful olfactory gaps, and then we have moments when we detect something, and then that smell might appear to fade, but really part of it is that our systems have said, it's actually not a threat to us, it's not an issue, we can actually just let that one go. And that then enables us to be ready to sniff something new.
Wow. Yeah. So I guess what is it that determines somebody's ability to figure out if something is relevant to them or if something's a threat or something's good? Is that like just early childhood conditioning and experience with those smells, or is there some other element to that?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, there's an element of it that's conditioning. I mean, kids don't find the smell of their own feces worrying, but they're advised and told as years go by that actually that's dirty and they shouldn't actually go anywhere near it. So that process of association is very much a learned behaviour and is formed. Um, but equally, you can change and train your palate to like, appreciate, detect difference between different things. So, in the process of becoming a master of wine, you educate your palate. If you're in the business of becoming a perfumer, you educate your nose equally in terms of the aromas and being able to distinguish and differentiate between them. So all of us have this capacity to be able to train our noses. Some of us choose to do so because we're more interested than others.
Yeah, yeah. And that's something that I kind of want to talk about in a little bit, but we'll get there because that is a big part of kind of your work is training people to smell in different places. But before we kind of get on that track, I think one of the things that a lot of people in like the pop science world kind of know about is that smell is like deeply associated to memory. And I guess that kind of makes sense based on what you're saying when smell is it's kind of it's a mechanism which helps us avoid potential danger. But I guess why is it that smell is so closely linked with our ability to remember things?
Uh, this is something that sort of like you can look up and has been talked about a lot. It's sort of like, it's called the Proustian effect. It's that idea that smells trigger memories in ways that other sensory information doesn't. And one of the reasons that is attributed to this is the fact that smells enter the brain for processing via a slightly different route to other sensory information. So smells go via a part of the brain, a vestigial part of the brain called the amygdala. And that is sort of like low down at the back of the brain, and it processes emotions and associations. So that's one of the reasons why they think that because smells are processed there and they're immediately next to emotions and associations, that proximity and lack of processing and cognitive processing actually makes that link much more sort of just, it's a connection rather than a considered connection. Um, and I mean, sort of like neuroscience also says that, like other sensory information, smells are identified in the context of what we've already experienced. So if you have experienced something like that, it's likely to trigger that again. So
Yeah.
it's a phenomenal system where chemical reactions changes, they sort of like they undergo a change, they release an odor, and then our bodies respond to it in this phenomenal way that links back to our past, links through to a certain part of our brain, and triggers us to think about different things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I was thinking about in preparation for this, the notion of home, like the sense of home, like when you are home, it's like a multisensorial, somatic kind of feeling. And like I know when I return home to visit my parents or something, the space that they've created, it like transports me into this very different kind of awareness, this different kind of physiological place, and there's something about like smell and like that sense of home that I think can be like really regulating or dysregulating if you had a bad home life. But there's something about that I just think is like really rich and really something we just like take for granted. That smell is like a big thing in bringing us back to ourselves in a way, and our
Yeah.
stories. And
And smell and home are quite an interesting sort of topic in its own right, because the smell of home, we tend to, as you've just said, we tend to think of it as being something that is, it's warm, it's welcoming, there's multiple odors there, it's comforting. Um, and I was doing some work in Newport in Rhode Island many years ago, and people there sort of like were saying they were describing smell as the smell of home. And I said, well, what is it? I mean, what's in that smell of home? And for a lot of people there, it was the smell of the ocean. And they said because
oh
to
yeah,
reach Newport, you have to go over one of any number of bridges, and they're ocean bridges, and they're quite long. So you're quite often surrounded by the sort of like the mists that surround those bridges, and that's a sort of saline mist. They were saying that the smell of home to them is actually the smell of the ocean, and that was really interesting. And then I was in a very very different part of the world, in the industrial northwest of the UK, and there's a town, and it's got chemical processing works, it's got manufacturing units, it's got emissions from dog food, from burning waste, and it's got multiple noxious fumes that on a given a bad day and a bad time is it's quite a disgusting sort of like smell. But people who live there said that for them that's the smell of home. When they're going
mm,
down the sort of like the highway nearby there, said that sort of petrochemical stroke manufacturing smell is very much the smell of home. They recognise that they are home. So it's quite interesting that sort of like maybe you've got this scale of home smells where one is the greater context and the place that you come from, and then you've got another one that's actually smaller and is an interior space and is associated with the people and the objects of your childhood or where you now live.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. For me, I come from a city that was really big with sugar beets. And I don't know if you've ever smelled like sugar beet factories, but it is objectively not a great smell. But whenever I smell it, I'm like, oh, that reminds me of the fall, of going back to school. Um, yeah, so it's just
Uh-huh.
really interesting. I'd be curious to see like the experience of like that smells like home in like the petrol city and then the coastal city. I wonder if physiologically it brings on the same effects, like the sense of feeling home is like the same in both of those kinds of situations.
And I think, I mean, that's one of the things that neuroscience can definitely do. I mean, it's sort of like that it can plant devices on you, and it can actually measure brain activity. So you could actually look at that and see if those smells associated in that context. And I think, I mean, sort of like one of the things that's really important to point out here is that smells don't exist in isolation. So context is actually really important, and there'll be part of a smell of home that will be associated with where you are and the expectation of arriving, and if you are on foot, if you're on a public transport, if you're in a car to be getting there, whether you're actually walking through certain rooms, what you're seeing, what you're hearing also contribute to that overall sensation, that then smell may be the final part of that actually puts it all and seals it all together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing because I'm sure that that also cuts both ways. So, the fact that we oftentimes don't really emphasize smell at all, but if you were to remove it, then I think that
Yeah.
it would totally destabilize and really throw people off their equilibrium in a way. It's like this hidden uh, force that we just don't give credit to, but is actually so interdependent with every other aspect of our embodiment.
Absolutely, and there were a couple of reasonably high-profile cases of people who very tragically sort of committed suicide as a result of losing their sense of smell and not
Wow.
realizing that that's what was happening to them. And curiously, I mean, sort of like COVID actually gave everybody an opportunity to think about what it might be like to lose your sense of smell, because I mean, before COVID, everybody said, I'd rather lose my sense of smell than my mobile phone. And
Oh,
I
wow.
sort of like, my sensory friends just went, what? Your cell
Yeah,
phone's
yeah,
more
yeah.
important than one of your senses. But I mean, and because it's not a digital sense, you can't record smells digitally. You can't create them digitally. You can't recreate them on demand. You can't sort of like, it doesn't have that same functionality. So it's it's a sense that we don't use as much because we haven't developed that capacity. Um, and therefore, people sort of like were putting it to one side and said, you know what, my whole life is digital. I prefer to have my cell phone than I would to have my sense of smell. Then COVID came along and people went, you know what, that's really weird because
Yeah.
if I can't smell, then I can't taste. And excuse me, but how does that work? It's like, well,
Yeah.
80% of flavor is actually smell. So yeah,
Yeah.
if you can't smell, then you've actually lost your enjoyment of food, and that's where it
Hmm.
starts to become sort of like quite a big issue. And there's people whose sense of smell has changed as a result of COVID. Some people haven't fully regained it, and I just think that if you're one of the lucky ones where it all stayed intact, then you should really go out and appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting that we had that chance to run the experiment of you have your digital life, but you also don't have your sense of smell. And then people, had that opportunity to experience that is kind of unique. Yeah, but what I'm curious about, as you are kind of encouraging people to engage with their sense of smell, what exactly happens when we live in such a hyper visual world, and you're encouraging people to kind of foreground their sense of smell and go out into the world and experience that. What kind of changes have you noticed with people who take on that as a practice?
I it's really, I mean, it's fascinating watching what happens because sort of like a lot of people will approach. I mean, let's rewind somewhat. In order to get people to engage with their sense of smell more, what I do is I lead smell walks, and so that is where I will choose a route, take a group of people out, and give them some strategies for being able to walk for a short period of time, using their nose as their sort of like primary modality, their primary way of knowing and understanding the world. Many people will start a smell walk and they'll be very unsure of themselves about how good their noses are, whether they don't think they're going to be able to identify smells. They're sort of like they're reticent to actually get involved. So it's a very deliberately scaffolded sort of structure that I have for the walks to lead them into it gently.
Yeah.
And it's what they get at the end of it is a real sense of achievement in realizing for most of them that actually their sense of smell is better than they thought. Equally, they go away saying, I will never be able to encounter the world in the same way again. And thirdly, it's usually slowed them down so that they've seen things they wouldn't normally see unless they were on a smell walk. So you've got this
Mm.
sort of tripartite effect of undertaking a smell walk that changes them in the moment of doing it. It gives them some confidence and it changes them in terms of their awareness of the world there and after.
Wow. So they're able to actually interact with their other senses with a greater degree of awareness or
Yeah, I mean, it's more about actually being sensorially aware, and I mean, there's different ways that sort of like the practice of it came and was developed on the back of the Soundscapes project, which ran in Vancouver in the 1970s, and in that the Soundscapes project is about active listening, and the Smellscape project equally is about active smelling. It's about saying, I need to prepare myself to receive this sensory information because it's not part of my everyday life.
Mhm.
And it's something that you do for a short period of time. You don't try and do it for too long. If, if I take people on a smell walk and it lasts longer than 40 minutes, I've lost them. They've just sort of like they've
Yeah.
meandered off into the distance. They haven't got a clue
Yeah.
anymore about what's going on. They can't
Yeah.
concentrate any further. And you might as well just have
Wow.
sort of like a whole load of primary school kids out there going, what's happening next? And so
Yeah.
they forget to record anything. It's just like it's completely different. But at
Yeah.
the start, they're quite keen.
Yeah. 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 It's kind of an interesting thing, you know. I feel like when someone looks at you, you get a sense. And you're like, oh, that person's looking at me, that person's listening to me. But it's totally different when somebody smells you. You know, when somebody actively is like, you know, it's like there's something like we understand like the vulnerability or the intimacy of that, even if we don't
Yeah.
acknowledge it, you know. And there's just something about it that is it's so unspoken, but it is there.
Yeah, last weekend I was up in Manchester and it was a what's a place making and place branding conference. So it's really sort of like it was people who were concerned with sort of like the distinctive qualities and characteristics of the places that they sort of like live and work in. And we were out smelling, and somebody said, "Look, I just want to smell other people. I'm just really
Mm,
curious about sort of like how you can do this." And so she was sort of like, she said, I felt I had to go up and do it surreptitiously because I couldn't actually ask people if I could smell them. There's something
yeah,
vaguely transgressive about this as a behavior that
yeah,
says, as you say, the, the perceived intimacy of going close to somebody and sniffing is
yeah.
absolutely there. And it's like, I mean, we always come across bicycles. People always sniff bicycles, and somebody always sniffs bicycle seats, and you really shouldn't, because when people look at it, it's just like it's wrong on so many counts. But
Yeah,
you can't
yeah,
help
yeah.
it, especially if there's a nice leather saddle there. You go, okay, I can get down to the chain and I can get to the oil, but you know what? That's going to be really interesting. And then you go, no, no, no,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my
no.
God. Yeah, people are watching. Oh, there's Kate again. Yep, doing her smell walks. Yeah, hide your bikes.
I say it. I sort of like there was a time with the Instagram feed where I could just post a photograph saying, you know, it's a smell walk when, because there'd be somebody with their nose in a trash can, there'd be somebody else sniffing a
Yeah,
tree, there'd be somebody else trying to sniff somebody else's hair, there'd be somebody with a bicycle. It's like, here we go.
yeah. That takes some boldness. Yeah, that's some good marketing material. I don't know if it'll attract a lot of people, but you know, it definitely makes a statement. You know, there's another element of smell that I find to be really fascinating, and I don't know if I totally have the words for it. It's more of an intuitive sense, but I feel like there's a relationship between smell and our perception of time as a linear thing. You know, I think when we rely on our other senses, our visual, our audio, it really is just like what is arising right now. I see a person in front of me, I hear something, you know, I'm tasting something, but with smell, you can actually you smell something that has came before in a way, you know. And I think a lot about dogs, you know, like a dog, their primary sense is smell in the way that ours is sight, or so I'm told. And you know, when you take a dog for a walk and it's smelling like a fire hydrant, it's smelling like days worth of interaction. So like I wonder how that affects their perception of time, and when you start to bring this into the foreground a little bit more, what that does to your relationship to place and who you are in that moment. Is there any sort of consideration for that?
There's some interesting, I mean, again, there's sort of like the smelly world is an interesting set of people that work in a variety of disciplines. And some of the people that I've loved interacting with have been the canine cognitive people. So they've actually really studied dogs and how they smell. And they say that there's an interesting related thing about time and smell with dogs is that dogs will actually sense how long you've been away from the house by how much your smell is diminished, which I always really liked as the idea of a sort of like a smell clock, that if you're that sensitive that you can actually smell the diminishment of somebody's scent around you, you know how long it is since you last saw them. And I think that is quite gorgeous. They did a little bit of one of the projects that I did in Kyiv in the Ukraine many years ago. We were looking at time and smell, and just looking at the different temporalities of smell. So it can be something that's very immediate. So it can be something that's sort of like you go, oh, right, I'm smelling this now, and then this took me back to childhood. So you can time travel with smell, which is really interesting. But the other side of it as well is that you can use you can detect periods of time going as in a marketplace we could smell 4 seasons. So you actually had the whole of that year inside one marketplace with 4 different smells. There was strawberries, there was pine, there was fat, there was something else. Somebody else on that walk said they noticed the smell of garbage getting worse in the city. And so the garbage issue in Kiev was a big problem at the time in that there weren't enough incinerators for it. And so they were burning it for longer and longer. And that then had a direct impact on the smell coming from them. So you knew about the state of the incinerators by how long the garbage was burning for. And there are multiple temporalities involved with smelling that again would make some really interesting sort of clock type experiments, but also that sort of like jumping time travel.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also interesting to bring it back to our four-legged friends, with dogs. There's been some research that has shown that they can actually smell when somebody's about to like have a seizure. They can smell like when a storm is coming. So there's actually, it doesn't just go back, but it also seems to kind of go forward in a way too, where there's like some predictive qualities of smell.
There are, and there's sort of like there are dogs that are used to, I think it's Parkinson's, that they can actually
Hmm.
smell out in humans in advance. And I mean, in a way, that's a sort of like that's a highly sensitized way of detecting something. So they're just more sensitive. If you look back to doctors and physicians in sort of like the 17th, 18th century, they'd quite often use smell as a way of um, diagnosing illness in the same way that
Yeah.
we're talking about dogs doing. So they would say, oh, I can smell sort of like honey on your breath. That means that you're probably diabetic. So
Wow.
you do have humans using their sense of smell in different ways at different times and sensitizing to it. Um, and it's interesting to note that we've lost that as we've got different science and different techniques that have taken over. But actually resensitizing ourselves to it, who knows what we might be able to actually detect and find out.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of leads us really nicely into where I wanted to go next. Now that we've kind of really laid the table out for people on just what smell is and how it kind of impacts our day-to-day living, I guess the next place I'd like to go is how do we strengthen our sense of smell? You're doing these smell walks, but are there any like set practices that people who are listening to this today can go out into the world and begin kind of playing with this a little bit more? How do they start kind of cultivating that ability?
It's like with anything. You practice. I mean, I was talking earlier about my granddaughter, and I mean, if I give her herbs to smell every single time that I see her, then she's going to get used to smelling those. She's going to know what they are. She's going to be able to identify the differences between them. And so, for people who have lost their sense of smell, quite often what is advised is smell training, where you basically take some scents that you are reasonably familiar with that are quite different from each other, and you will smell those on a daily basis to actually train yourself up almost like a sort of an athlete would do it for their muscles. You're training your nose muscle in the capacity to be able to detect and recognize that particular pattern and say, right, that's the smell of lemon or that's the smell of rosemary. So you do it with 4 or 5 different things on a regular basis until you can go, okay, I can really, really smell that. I mean, and I also think another lovely one that perfumers do when they're going through their training is they start with a broad category and they say, okay, take citrus. Here's citrus fruits. I have a whole range of them. Sniff them every day for a week. Do you recognize citrus? Yep. Okay. Now, can you pinpoint the difference just from the skin and the oil of lemon over orange? And does orange smell different to tangerine or mandarin? And does grapefruit smell different? And you go, of course it does. But you actually need to get close and to sniff those and to say, all right, now I know what they are and I know that they smell different. Then could I actually pick them up at random and try them and detect them? So there's some great sort of like smell games, and there are many kids games and that are out there that include the sense of smell, and new ones being developed all the time. So I think if we're into gaming, then gaming with smell is a way of increasing our capacity to be able to improve the quality of our noses.
Yeah, oh, I love it. Would you have any feedback for people who like how do we relate to bad smells? You know, is it? I mean, the instinct is to kind of like, oh, nope, not doing that. But is there any benefit to kind of like resting with a bad smell? You know, you're mentioning people sniffing bike seats and trash cans, and I guess how do we relate to that as we're beginning our smell journeys?
I think you have to put your assumptions aside, and quite often a trash can doesn't smell anywhere near like a trash can. You look at it
Mm,
and you think it's going to smell evil, and most trash cans actually don't. And it's you have to break down your sort of like preconceptions about how something's going to smell. That would be my sort of like my first response to that. The second one would then be to say, actually, you know what, go out there, sniff it. If it is bad, you can walk away. It's only really short, it's only temporary, you don't need to worry about it. And so that would be that's the second part of it. Bad smells exist, they exist for a reason. They are an alert to our systems to move away, and we can move away. You can't close your nose, but you can move away, and they don't last for very long. If they do, get
yeah,
yourself out of there.
yeah, yeah. So is there any smell in and of itself that is potentially dangerous? I know that they could like signal that something is potentially dangerous, but like if you like take something, I mean, it's such an intimate thing to be able to take it into your
Yeah,
brain, like these direct
yeah,
compounds. Like, is there anything that we know about that's like, oh, you smelled that, now you're gonna get hurt or something?
there are several things that are carcinogenic, so you shouldn't really go around smelling diesel fumes.
Mm,
So, I mean, any of the sort of exhausts, pollutants, those types of things, largely stay away from. You've got no need to get in close and sniff them. And sort of if you sniff exhaust fumes, that you're likely to suffocate anyway. Um,
mhm.
Interestingly, or not, carbon monoxide is equally lethal but has no odor to it, which is why we
Yeah.
actually add a smell as a warning. So actually, the warning smells that you have been inculcated to learn and appreciate really should give you an idea about what you should stay away from.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bummer because I was gonna ask you like I don't know why, but I really actually enjoy the smell of gasoline. I don't know what it is. Like when I'm filling up my car, I'm like, there's something pleasant about this, and I'm like, something got broke somewhere along
Yeah.
the line. I don't know what, but
But it's interesting because gasoline is also a smell that's in Riesling wines, so the real high quality.
yeah,
So there's sort of like there is that odor in there, and it's like it's an important one. I know exactly what you mean. There's something that sits on that sort of like love it hate it cusp that says
yeah,
it's a challenging smell, but I don't
hmm,
dislike it. And I met somebody
hmm.
that said they really like the smell of skunk, and that
Oh
really
wow,
did have me thinking.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, as somebody who used to smoke a lot of cannabis, I can attest that like now, like after going through that lifestyle, I'm like, yeah, sometimes some skunk. I'm like, oh, what's going on here? I don't know what that is, but maybe that's just me. Uh, yeah. Where do we go from there? So, one of the things, I
Ways,
don't know
but
if you
yeah.
know any, I don't know if you know anything about it. And, I'm a massage therapist by trade. It's kind of my day job. And, I've taken some classes on like aromatherapy, Is there anything about using smell in a way that could actually help people in like their wellness practices or in like regulation, or have you done any searching into that?
It's it's not been my area of expertise at all. I mean, I know that there are different scents that, especially, I mean, I try to work, if I can, with people in the real world, smelling things that exist in the real world rather than concentrated forms or recreating environments. Sometimes my work takes me into different places, and with some of the maps that I've done, I've created smells to go with maps or worked with people to do that. And I really like the smells that are the naturally occurring products over and above synthetically created ones. There's something that is fundamentally different about them. They're far more complex. And with that, to a limited degree, I read a little bit about how certain smells make you feel more alert, other smells are more likely to sort of like relax you. I think there's a lot in the herbal medicine that, again, we haven't lost, but we've moved away from it. And I think it's time to sort of like reconsider plants and herbs as remedies, as part of our everyday lives. And so with that will come the aromas of having them around us and around in our environments, as well as when we ingest them, when we cook with them, and when we use them around our and grow them in our gardens.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's really such a big part of cooking in general. I know all it takes for me to really enjoy somebody's cooking is like a little bit of garlic and onion, and I'm just like, what is that? That's so profound. Like you're a really good cook. And it creates like the whole experience, as like the smell process throughout each stage of preparing a dish and then eating it. I mean, and that makes me feel really good.
I think, I mean, it's one of the fundamental joys of living is eating. And for
Hmm.
me, that goes way backwards to preparing food, to actually growing it if I can, to looking at what those raw ingredients are. And as human beings, we can trust our bodies. If we put stuff into it that we know what we're putting into it, we can trust ourselves to know when we're full, when we've had enough, when we've had too, when we when we need, or our bodies actually need something different to eat. And that's a whole part of the process, and that's very much a sensory feedback loop, that your body tells you what it needs and you go, you know what, that smells good at the moment, that's exactly what I need.
Yeah.
And the more we engage with that whole process, I think we'll be much happier and healthier as human beings.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is it's a process of relating, it's like relating to your body by really listening to what it is kind of craving and like what is making it feel good. And I found like the process of getting into cooking has really informed me a lot about myself. And when you really sink into the preparation of food, I mean, sometimes it could take an hour or 2 hours, and that entire experience is like a very somatic, embodied kind of thing. And so much of that has to do with the smells and the different kind of phases of cooking. And yeah, I've really learned a lot about who I am through that.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's beautiful. We were talking earlier a little bit about sort of like the temporal aspect and how time changes. You think about when you're cooking a meal and the smells that change as you go through that process. If you're cooking onions first and then you add garlic to it, you've got changes that are happening there. Then you're working through something else that you're adding to it. Then you're smelling it to see what it sort of like smells like, about what else it might need, and then you might add some herbs into it at the end. That's just a wonderful way of spending time.
Yeah.
It's therapy in its own right. I'm absolutely convinced of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
for
smell
sure.
therapy in its own right as well, because you've just got this sort of like this evolution of a smellscape that goes with a dish that you're creating. And then you bring it out and
Yeah.
everybody goes, "Oh, that smells good," and eats it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a multimodal art, and then it can be visual as well. Wow, I'm starting to just really appreciate cooking more as we're talking.
I'm starting to get hungry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. Yeah. So to bring it back to kind of your work, with the smell maps, I kind of want to just talk a little bit about how you're integrating maps into design? You know, what is the relationship? Like you're creating these maps of these urban scapes, and like I guess what can you do with those? Like how can like city planners use those and developers, and you know what is like the next step for that?
It's interesting. It's a really good question again because I create the work, and what I like to do is actually say, this is my specialism. I collect the data. I found ways to interrogate it, analyze it. I'm now working on an atlas of scents, smells, and stinks, which has got 40 new maps in it. And what the smells tell you about different places around the world, from sort of like Antarctica to dragons in Ljubljana. I mean, it's really interesting. Um, but what what people can what other people can do with it, to my mind, is very much up to them. If they can see an application for it, I actually really like working with them to understand how it can be applied in their context, so they know what they need. So that sort of like working with the Institute of Place Marketing and Place Branding, I start to be able to see that actually, if you're looking to create a cultural identity for a city or a town, including smell as part of that enables people to recognize that place as having distinctive characteristics. So it's one of the contributory factors in that. Similarly, with architecture, interior architecture, if you are trying to connect two different spaces, and you can't do that visually with architecture, then you can actually possibly do it with smell. So you create a scent corridor that actually connects spaces together.
Wow.
Um, so in a way, it's about working with those different people and say, all right, if you're creating with urban planners, if you've got a road here and you've got residential here, stick some trees in between, because not only will they take up some of the carbon monoxide and the fumes, but they'll also provide a sound barrier, and they'll actually give out oxygen, so that you've actually got a nicer environment for people to actually breathe in. Thinking about parks and places for people to go to in terms of mental health in cities, it can actually be aided by thinking about smell as a component element in those. So that I think there are many applications, and what I really enjoy is just feeding and bouncing off people in terms of how they want to work with it, and then how I can sort of like feed them parts from my work that help them make their own arguments for including smell as part of their work.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's something about like uh, emphasizing smell feels like a really like human-centered like optimization. I feel like so many design choices are made for like efficiency or like maximizing profit, but in order to actually integrate like smell consideration, like that is almost it feels like always a benefit for people and the environment, and it's like a very like pro health kind of thing to incorporate.
It's also quite mindful. It's that, I mean, we were talking earlier about the smell walk. The smell walk slows people down, and it becomes almost like a meditative practice because we are focusing on it, and because it is for maybe 45 minutes of thinking about smells. It does enable you just to sort of like to slow and to think in slightly different ways, rather than being obsessed with getting somewhere on time. Actually, you can become slightly more obsessed with getting somewhere in a really lovely way, or a way that
Hmm.
is good for how you feel at that moment in time, whether you want to be stimulated or whether you want to walk through and be somewhere in a calmer environment. I think
Yeah.
smell is definitely about, it's the slow food movement of existence.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's a good description. Well, I want to respect your time. There was a whole other consideration of like the politics of smell that I'm just like, oh, that's like a whole conversation that I think we could really dive in. But, I want to respect where you're at. So I want to just leave you with an opportunity to kind of just plug how people can connect with you. If there's anything that they can do to help support you, maybe like learn a little bit more. And as well as that, if you could just share what your favorite smell is, that would also be cool.
I'll do the last one first. My favourite smell is very probably the smell of garden shed, just because
Oh,
of
cool.
because there's so much in there, and it's one of those ones that if you have to imagine smells, which you have to, because in this medium that we're working through now, we can't actually share them. So I could actually say to you, well, okay, the lawnmower's in there, it's got grass on it. The grass was cut reasonably recently, but it's still got some dried out hay smells, but it's also got some fresh cut grass smells. Then there's a little bit of what the shed's actually painted with, and it might be something like a creosote, and it's there to actually sustain it. Then there's actually the smell of the timber of the shed, but because the timber is actually wooden slatted and it's quite a cool day, there's the cool air that's coming in as well. There's some musty
Mm-hmm.
things that have been used as covers for garden furniture in the winter that are still in there. And there's the odd paint pot, and there may even be some sort of like some terps or something that was used on some old brushes before the paints were not oil based. It's a combination smell that just goes
Mm.
beyond compare. And if it's a sunny day, then you may have a little bit of the roofing felt smell that's coming through as well. It's the richest, most beautiful smell ever, garden shed.
I love that. That's poetry to me.
Um,
Wow.
a lot of the descriptions of smells that come from the smell walks is poetry. There's a
Mhm.
largely lyrical quality to it that enables people to imagine what smells are like. I have a website, Sensory Maps, which has got some of the work that I've been doing over the past 15 years. There's an Instagram site called Atlas of Smells, and that relates to the book that I'm currently producing. So that will be 40 maps around the world. About three quarters of the way through it now. Last quarter will be out
Wow.
by May next year, and then it's on for publication. That's commissioned by Orion Press. I think it'll be published by Chronicle Books in the US. Um,
Wow.
and then anybody who's interested, I'm on LinkedIn as Kate Mclean. Just reach out. I would like the Smellscape project. It's open source. I want other
Mm.
people to go to the smell walks. I want them to create smell maps. I want this to be something that everybody feels that they can do and they can use. It's it is very accessible, and I'm always willing to work with anybody. A lot of people volunteered to help with the book, and that's just been fantastic. They've led smell walks in Hyderabad in India that I'm currently drawing up and writing up. So there's been an amazing sort of like collective effort on it so far, and I'd just like that to extend as far as possible.
Wow. Amazing. Well, Kate, thank you again so much for joining me. This was really quite a pleasure. It's got me thinking about a lot of different things that I'm sure to take on with me as I move about my days. So thank you so much.
Happy
And I
sniffing.
wish you, yeah, yeah, you as well. All right, take care.
Thank you for having me on, Brett. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here talking to you. Take care.
Wonderful. You too. All right, that was the episode, everybody. Thank you so much for listening all the way through until the end. You know, I do truly make this show for you. Once more, that was Dr. Kate Mclean. I hope you enjoyed connecting with her as much as I did. If so, you can always follow her work over at sensorymaps.com. She's got a lot of stuff there regarding these maps. You can actually take a look at them and kind of peruse all of her published work. It really is just so interesting. So if you found this conversation fascinating, I encourage you to go check her out. She's also got a couple other interviews out there on the interwebs. If you want to support this show in particular, you can head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/21st century vitalism, and consider becoming a member. It helps me keep the wheels moving and the show churning out more and more episodes. So thank you so much. If not that, subscribe at YouTube, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook. You know the digital age shuffle as well as anybody else. We will catch you on the next episode, so take care out there.